Hello, my name's Noel Kingsbury, and with my colleague Annie Guilfoyle, I run Garden Masterclass. Now, Annie and I started Garden Masterclass 6 years ago to put on live educational events in the British Isles. But with COVID, the lockdown, in April 2020, we started doing a public service broadcast. And then we've settled down to running both live events, but also with a big online content. So we do this Thursday Garden Chat once a week on a Thursday evening, 6 o'clock Western European time. And those recordings then go up on to YouTube. Now, we also do webinars. We have a webinar season that runs through from September to May. We get leading experts globally from the garden and landscape world to talk about their specialism. And of course, that's an opportunity to ask them questions. Most of those webinars are recorded and are then available through Vimeo from our website. We also put on courses. There's a course on naturalistic planting design, for example, which I do with Professor Nigel Dunnett of the University of Sheffield in Northern England. And we sometimes get involved in organising conferences. We do all sorts of things that are aimed at encouraging quality planting, quality gardening, knowledge about plants and botany, plant science, and we hope you'll join us. We have a membership scheme which gives you discounts on our webinars and live events and various other goodies, but also you can just sign up for our monthly email newsletter to keep in touch with what we're doing. We believe, and we've been told by many people, that what we do is unique. It's unique in the range and quality of people we talk to and our global reach and our diversity. So hope you enjoy this particular episode and do come back for more. Well, today we got a report, my report, in fact, from this year's BUGA, the German Bundesgartenschau Federal Garden Show. I was there about a month ago, and I spent a day filming around the show. So we have that, and also an interview with Ina Spell, the Chief Press Officer of the Federal Garden Show Society. So, welcome to the BUGA, the Bundesgartenschau, the biannual German garden show, which moves around the country, because it's very much about not just having a summer-long festival of horticulture and landscape, and indeed anything to do with land and environment, but also is an opportunity to regenerate abandoned industrial and military sites. So it's a brilliant way of creating a really good legacy of quality public space. This year's event is in Mannheim, at the top of the southwest state of Baden-Württemberg, and it in fact links two sites, the Luisen Park, which is a historic park, and Spinelli, which is an old American military base, a very bleak place on a flat area of land, last used for repairing tanks after the Iraq War. So that is a site that will be left with some sort of infrastructure as a public space. Now, about a year and a half ago, we had an interview with Ina Spell, who is the press officer for this year's BUGA, and she was talking generally about what the Bundesgartenschaus are, what they do, so if you'd like to watch that, then perhaps that'll give you a bit of the background. Then a few weeks ago, we had Thursday Garden Chat with Bettina Jaugstetter, who is this year's lead designer at this year's Mannheim BUGA, talking about both her perennial plantings, but also these incredible annual plantings she's done. And it's those we're going to look at first. The amazing thing about these is that Bettina has basically worked throughout the years working with perennials. This is the first time she's done any annual planting on any kind of scale. There's 4,000 square meters of this. It's amazingly varied, amazingly vibrant, and she planted out most of it herself. It's an incredible achievement. I think the really incredible thing about BUGA as the summer-long event
rather than the legacy, is the diversity it illustrates of what goes on in Germany in gardens and public and private landscapes. There's always quite a lot here about farming and the land and the countryside as well. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, and there's also, as we shall see, some rather crazy stuff as well.
Yeah, so for you, what was special about this year's BUGA, especially innovative or surprising or?
Well, for me, very special was the Spinelli area, the former military area.
Yeah.
Personally, I had never seen anything like this before, although conversion of a military area can be an aspect of BUGA and has been before. But in Mannheim, it was military area until 2014, and then it turned into a wasteland until the building of the BUGA began.
Yeah.
And so there were 62 hectares of the area which were unsealed and the buildings demolished and roads taken up. And when I visited the first time in 2021, there was lots of ruderal vegetation. There were roses everywhere, wild roses. And the old buildings, there's a large U-shaped hall, which was partly dismantled, and it had this industrial charm, industrial feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there was a very special atmosphere, and I'd hoped they would keep it like this, even with the building of the BUGA. And I think it went quite well. They managed to keep the spirit, although maybe so many people will have visited the BUGA in the end of October, around 2 million. I think the feeling is still there. And also they have large areas which are just open land, which will in the future will be without human intervention, and they keep these areas for the protection of species. And I think this is very special.
Yes, and I like the way that the openness and kind of semi-dereliction of the site was preserved. I mean, there's these sort of piles of rubble covered in brambles at kind of key points. You felt it was I mean, it was one of those things that in the past people would have been saying, oh, they haven't finished clearing the site. But I mean, nowadays we see these places very differently, particularly these very biodiverse brownfield sites. And the fact that it was in this extraordinarily kind of open, barren landscape, possibly wasn't everyone's taste, but it sort of did give a very special atmosphere. So what are the plans for the site? Well, how will it be developed in post?
It will be a grand nature recreation area for both humans and species.
Yes.
There will be some cafes and restaurants still, but the garden show, which was quite intensely built and planted for the BUGA, will be dismantled. It will take a few months.
Yes.
The trees, there were 2023 trees, they will be transferred to the city center, to different sites in the city. So the area will stay very open, and this is the most important most important aspect of the whole BUGA. There will be a permanent green space and not a building site for new urban quarters. And the trees will have to go because the air that drifts through this free space will lower the temperatures in the city center in the hot summers to come. So the whole site is a fresh air corridor, and this is the achievement of the BUGA.
Right. Yes. Interesting. So now I know there's been a real emphasis on sustainability at the BUGA. And could you tell us a bit more about what they were doing to try to make it a more sustainable event?
Well, yeah, it says that the BUGA set out to be one of the most sustainable BUGAs ever. And when it was built, most of the materials on site were reused. Steel was used to make fences, and the chunks of concrete are habitats for the lizards now. And during the show, there's also an emphasis on sustainability. We only use reusable cups for drinking, and all the paper towels are recycled, for example. And there are also 17 gardens, which address the 17 sustainable development goals of the United Nations. Yeah, but you also asked about buildings of the garden.
Yes, in my looking around the gardens, I mean, there were some which were very clearly engaging with sustainability in the way that I feel German and Dutch gardeners in particularly do very well. But there were some that seemed to involve an awful lot of concrete or corten steel, which I think perhaps... I was just wondering, were there any guidelines for building of the small gardens?
Yeah, no, there were no guidelines.
No.
Because we wanted to give the builders the freedom to do what they like, but they knew about the spirit of the BUGA, and in most of the gardens, the materials were reused, like the steel or the concrete. And they will be used again after BUGA. And stone steps, for example, were used at previous gardens and will be used again. And also the gardens have many aspects of sustainability you can't see at the first sight. For example, rainwater management or the reusing of cobblestones. And there was also a high biodiversity in most of the plantings.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Mannheim itself is a very multicultural city. I mean, I was struck. I stayed there a couple of nights, and I was struck by just how it felt almost like a Middle Eastern city at times, and thoroughly enjoyed the Turkish cafes. But the BUGA, on the 2 occasions I went, it still felt a very white event. I was wondering what was being done to kind of make the BUGA a more diverse event, appealing to everyone in the community.
Yeah, well, I think there's done a lot, and we might need to correct you a little bit because my colleagues who work there, they observe many younger people with migration background, the BUGA as visitors. And maybe it depends on the time and day.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Saturday might be the typical, German white older people. I don't know. So we see a lot of families with children and people from many nations. And BUGA does a lot concerning diversity. They have a rainbow hub, for example, a special occasion for queer events in the cooperation with the Queer Center Mannheim. There's also an interreligious garden.
Yes.
And I think one of the most interesting aspects is they have this daily campus program for school kids. And this is open, of course, for all the schools, all the kids. So the whole multicultural, I don't know, children, they have the same access to the BUGA, and this is a very important part for them this year. So.
And I must say one thing I noticed on the website that I thought was really good in terms of new immigrants to Germany was there's information about the site in simplified German, which I think is really good for people who are the many learners of German. Yeah. Yes. So now, what was your favourite part of the BUGA?
My favorite part.
If you're allowed to express an opinion.
Well, we have 2 parts of the BUGA, the Luisen Park also we haven't mentioned yet, and it's very beautiful on a summer evening with plantings and the new buildings. But my favorite part actually is Spinelli, walking there on a warm summer evening with a glass of wine and looking at the at the borders by Bettina Jaugstetter, the beautiful perennial plantings and the concrete roads, which have settled in so well. I think that would be my favorite part.
Yes. No, certainly. I'd never been to the Louisen Park before, and it was a wonderful 19th century landscape, fantastic mature trees, and I even noticed some storks nesting in the top of a monkey puzzle. But that new entrance area with plantings by Harald Sauer, I think that really added something to the site. Yes.
It's difficult to narrow it down to one favorite spot for me.
I'm sure. Yes. So where's the next BUGA going to be?
The next BUGA is going to be in the Ruhr area. It will be IGA Metropole Ruhr International Garden Exhibition. In the former coal mining region, which has lots of interesting parks and industrial nature and industrial culture. And the IGA will take part in several different locations. We have 5 future gardens and many communal gardens and hundreds of private gardens. So the concept, and this will be in 2027.
Yes. So this sounds like a bit of a new concept, really.
Well, we had BUGAs with more than one location already, but this has 3 levels: communal gardens and BUGA gardens and private gardens, which is quite an interesting concept, and it will allow more people to take part, and it will be even more diverse than this one.
Great. And I think the Ruhrgebiet will be an interesting area to do it, given the region's history and the fact that it's now had really several decades of being a post-industrial area. I mean, those of us who are actually old enough to remember the smokestacks and everything were probably diminishing. So that should be really interesting. Yes,
you will come and visit.
Of course I will. Yes. I look forward to that. Put it in the diary. Okay, so thank you very much, Ina. That was a useful introduction, and
you're welcome. Thank you.
So we look forward to keeping in touch.
And we're here in a display where they've got all the sculptures from the original Mannheim city square fountains, which were heavily damaged in the war and have been replaced by copies. So we have this rather surreal collection of battered old sculpture in these old sheds, and some nice use of climbers, which will eventually, I suspect, be intended to cover the whole structure. As with any one of these garden shows, there are, of course, areas where garden designers and landscape companies who make private gardens show off their wares. There's a big emphasis on sustainability for the show overall, but with a lot of these private, rather commercially orientated garden build companies, there's an awful lot of concrete. One here, I'm glad to say, has got rather less concrete and rather more natural stone. Big emphasis here on herbs. And the theme of this garden, which is a rather herby one I liked, is Landlust meets Happiness. Landlust means the pleasure and joy of the countryside, and it's a major theme in German media at the moment. And this one does that quite nicely, I think. Landlust meets Happiness. an example of the kind of weird Anglo-German that seems to be developing as more and more English speakers live in Germany. Another very carbon-heavy garden here, involving absolutely, a lorry load of quarter-inch steel, which is a material I particularly loathe. I mean, really unsustainable and very expensive. I mean, very much a marker of people who want to show off how much they can spend on their gardens, and some very cliched sculptures. And more concrete. Inevitable green-roofed shed, which is such a growing feature of garden sheds generally here, and an absolute must at the BUGA. And we got somebody showing off one of these vertical planting systems, which in this case seems to be doing quite nicely. And here looks like someone's planted up a car. There's a water feature incorporated into the car. I think a few gimmicks to liven up a garden show. And indeed the theme of this is Aus alt mach neu, out of the old make new. And someone's using a Pennisetum grass in a vertical wall installation here, which I must admit is not something I'd ever thought of, but seems to work. Wonder how long it'll work. Oh, this is the experimentation area. And der grüne Ruhegarten, the green garden of quiet. Very heavy on the old Pennisetums. Now back where we were before in the previous broadcast with Bettina's, this is her blue-themed perennial planting cut into the concrete apron the Americans used to drive their tanks up and down. Interesting to see it a month later. Don't know whether it's been watered, but everything is looking really very good. This is a fairly thin substrate with incorporating a lot of demolition waste and reusing some of the old concrete slabs as well. So it's designed very much for post-industrial, post-demolition situations. Looking rather nice. And over there we've got a big open area where last year there was a rock concert happening. Thing about a BUGA is it's not just about gardening and landscape, it's something very much for all the family as well. And here's another one of Bettina's borders, the yellow border, looking rather jolly now with Rebecca fulgida in flower. And of course, a garden show always has to have veggies. Here all pretty generously provided with irrigation piping. And what's interesting is that they've left some of the areas of spontaneous vegetation that have developed since the military left this site. Some rather wonderful rose hips here, and it's a dry sandy soil, but we've got quite an interesting wildflower flora which I have to say in many places has been left, and that's very much the German way with these old sites. There's quite a tradition going back about 30 years now of recognising the importance of the spontaneous vegetation, and rather than tidying it all up and grassing it over, which has so often been done elsewhere. Various things here, not food crops, because this is all about what farmers might grow in their fields. Here we've got various green manures, which, given that quite a lot of German agriculture uses organic or biodynamic farming systems, then green manures play quite an important role. So here's an opportunity for the public to see what these things look like. And here we have sugar beet, which was actually developed in the 19th century in Prussia, in eastern Germany. Futterrübe, which is I think what we would call mangolds, eat the top as leaf beet. And here we've got some kind of mustard crop. Perhaps a crop of the future, amaranth, with those amazingly high protein seeds. Very good in hot, dry summers, so possibly a crop for the future. A rather wacky display here of herbs for health, or at least things like ginkgo that produce medicinal herbs. And I think they're all finding it a little bit difficult growing in these rather shallow substrate teacups in a hot summer. And that abuts onto Bettina's yellow-themed dry habitat concrete planting. Germany, like Britain and France, has a very long-standing tradition of rose gardens, which of course traditionally have featured lots of roses and precious little else. But here there's been a big effort to look at how you can integrate other plants, non-roses, into the rose garden. And this has all been done by Christian Meyer, who's a very experienced Berlin-based planting designer. There's a lot of other things that piggyback onto displays at BUGA. This is by the Mannheim County Women's Union, equivalent I suppose to the British Women's Institute. It's a great opportunity for all sorts of community organisations to tell the public about what they do in the context of an enjoyable, flowery day out. An area where you can learn about all the different vegetables grown here in these slightly over the top raised beds. Gemüse Akademie, the pun here is that Acker in German means a field. So this is the Vegetable Academy, obviously very much aimed at kids. Plenty of interpretation. If you really want to find out about lots of areas of gardening and landscape, and indeed farming, you've got no shortage of material here to learn from. It's all quite didactic, but nearly always done in a really nice, well-designed way. This is indeed all about fields. What do new plants need to grow big and strong? Yes, water, nutrients, sunlight. This is about relating world population to availability of agricultural land, and apparently here we have about 2,000 square meters each. And so that's really good at making people think about just what that cropland is used for. How much cropland is needed for my pizza margherita? Möglichkeitsgarten der Kirche. The garden of possibilities of the church, I think. Certainly a nice, shady, restful space. Various federal and state garden shows I've been to over the years. One of the areas I've always found most intriguing in terms of sheer cultural difference is the area devoted to cemetery and graveyard planting. This is hugely important in Germany. A bit difficult, I think, for Brits to understand, because our cemeteries seem to feature maybe a few plastic flowers, or indeed in the countryside the growing green wildflower churchyard movement. Things in Germany are very different. One of the things I find particularly interesting here is the ground covers, thymes and some very dwarf Cotoneaster and euonymus varieties. These are extraordinarily creative gravestones. I'm sure they'd never be allowed by the Church of England. And this is an area that's attracting, a lot of public attention. Balconies for a society where a lot of people live in flats, apartments. That's very important.
Kakteen, das sind die Pflanzen, fressen dann, die Chips fressen dann. Die können das im Mund tun. Genau. Da passt man nicht. Also an exhibition, a special exhibition about fuchsias, which I must admit I was somewhat underwhelmed by. It's simply too shady for the flowers to colour up properly, and the general tone of the exhibition was slightly over the top with pounding rock music. Here we've got some fuchsia bonsai. Don't look terribly happy.
Und wie macht der Fuchs wirklich? Dann spiel doch mal das crazy Lied dazu.
Fuchs in German, of course, means fox.
Und wie macht der Fuchs wirklich? Dann spiel doch mal das crazy Lied dazu.
Ja, die Nachbarn, die gehen auch pinkeln. Also die sind natürlich halt wirklich riesig.
Attracting quite a lot of attention, these hibiscus moschretos hybrids, which I can imagine are pretty thirsty plants. In fact, I know the wild ancestors are pretty much wetland plants, and they do well in hot summers if you can keep them watered. Not quite sure whether the sort of thing I'm going to plant there. Especially on one's balcony. The extraordinary flowers with the quality of crepe paper or almost an artificial fabric. So a sales area with plants for sale and a garden shop, and all in one of the old, now de-roofed military sheds.
Ey, Hanna, hier kannst du noch ein Käppchen brauchen.
Reminder here that in the natural habitat that's developed since this place ceased being a military reserve, there's 130 species of wild bees, which have really benefited from the being able to nest in the sandy soil and the patches of brambles and other wild vegetation. So I think this will remain as a very open steppe type landscape. And over there is the Seilbahn, the cable cars, which we will use to get to the next part of the exhibition in the Louisen Park.
We're now going over a whole area of the small gardens that people can rent out. You can even stay in some of these, and for a lot of people they are a really important part of life. For people who live in flats, it's an opportunity to garden and have some outdoor recreation at weekends. And here we are at the entrance to the Louisen Park, entrance to the BUGA, which is on the edge of the city of Mannheim, a 19th century park, and it's quite common for these events to do a makeover or introduce new elements to an existing park. Now the plantings here were done by Harald Sauer, who is the head gardener for the Park in nearby Ludwigshafen, and he's also responsible for the Hauptfriedhof, the main cemetery there as well. Ludwigshafen is very much an industrial town dominated by the vast BASF chemical works, but Harald is putting the place on the map because of his amazing plantings. He's very clever at repurposing old garden features that have become moribund or too expensive to maintain. He's developed some really inspiring minimalist plantings, but what he does best is these fresh new plantings using perennials, grasses, and as you can see here, some shrubby element. There's a rus here, which I suspect would be kept coppiced. I think a real strength of his planting design is his use of foliage. The Park, some wonderful examples of foliage of all kinds, and some really inventive ways of ensuring that long season of interest. Planting here, we're looking mid-August. It's probably past its best. but it's nice and grassy. And of course, we've now just starting the late season perennials, Sedum Matrona there, I think, and there's quite a few asters, Eupatoriums, and other autumn elements appearing. So, Bettina, you're taking a period of relaxation now? Your mic's off.
Yeah. No, not really. It's still something to do, but it's the last week of BUGA, and I think everybody's a little bit sad.
Yes, I bet. Yes.
Yeah, I will go tomorrow and probably day after tomorrow, and Sunday is the final ceremony. So yeah, actually it was really nice to go there just for an hour, 2 hours in the evening. It was very nice. Yeah, we will miss it.
Yes, I bet you will. Such a big part of your life to build up to, and then it's all over. So what's next for you?
For me?
Yes.
Well, today I've been to Stuttgart. I can do a very nice, very nice. I can do a perennial planting for the Wilhelma.
Yes.
So this is maybe about with perennials. It was a former annual bedding, and it will be a perennial planting now. Many public institutions or public spaces will change from annuals to perennials because of money reasons, maintenance, also
I would imagine water use. Annual. I should imagine annual plantings need a lot more water than well-established.
Much more water. Even so, I try to plant some drought-tolerant annual plantings for the BUGA, but yes, it's annual plantings need much more energy, resources than anything else. But on the other hand, it's also a culture part. So also a little bit sad to lose it, because when you see the big varieties, what is on the market, it's incredible how it's on the market, and it's almost not seen in the country.
Right. Yes.
Because nobody can afford to use it anymore. I think it's a little bit of pity.
Yes. Yes.
Sad, on the other hand. Yeah. So this is one project I'm just working on.
Right. And Ina, you were saying about the EGA being in 2027. Is there not another BUGA between now and then?
No, unfortunately not. Usually it's every 2 years.
Yes.
But for the first time in history, one city decided against the BUGA in 2025.
Really?
And they decided only, I think, 1.5 years ago, and you can't plan a BUGA in such a short time. So we will probably have something in 25, but I'm not sure what it will be yet. So we're looking at...
You know about pop-up gardens? Yes, something spontaneous. So we look forward then to 2027, to what sounds like it's going to be a really interesting event.
I think so, yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and looking forward to keeping in touch with you all.